computer. All right, good morning, everybody. This is Michael Becker, and today is Tinderbox Meetup on September 10th, 2023. Great to see you all. Typical Tinderbox Meetup format is we go around the room, we introduce anybody that's new. Today, it doesn't appear that we have anyone new, so then what we do is we bring up our individual projects that we may be working on. We ask questions about how to use the tools, and not just Tinderbox, but any knowledge management tool that may fit within this broader scheme of how we're trying to get work and curate our knowledge. And then finally, if we had a theme, we'll address a theme. And today we do not. So let's jump in, and who's working on what and who has any questions. So let's see what we can explore. Paul, Detlef, you got anything?
No, not really. But if you like, I can show a demo of how to use external files for the Tinderbox code. This is maybe useful if you share the same code for several Tinderbox files instead of copying it all the time from from file to file.
Would love to see that. All right, let's go around the room. Before we jump into that, let's get a list. Anybody else have anything else on the topic, or do we want to jump into that one straight away? All right, since no one's chiming in, Detlef, why don't you take the floor, and then I obviously can throw in some new ideas later too.
Okay, I do my best. It's I have to show you this. I didn't prepare anything for today, so it may be a little bit bumpy, my explanation, but it's not so complicated. My problem is I have several code snippets I would like to use over and over again in different files, and so what I normally do is copy everything into Tinderbox, and because Tinderbox, I use attributes, and there are dependencies between the files. I need preference nodes where I store my preferences. For example, here I have G preferences, G external code, G whatever. These all G is for me is global, and those are my preference files where I store things I have to use. And whenever I copy, for example, I have here my ChatGPT stuff, and I would like to use it in another file. I not only have to copy all my functions, but also additional stuff to make it running. And so I thought about having the files in one place on my hard disk in a folder where text files are in, and then I can use this folder, add it to my new Tinderbox file, and use all my functions all over wherever I like to do it. And so I started to build a folder called, I call it external code. Name it whatever you like to name it. It's the name doesn't matter here. And I'm using the watch folder property of.
Hey, Detlef, let's stop real quick and answer Paul's question before you move on.
Yeah.
So Paul, what Detlef, and correct me if I'm wrong, Detlef, but I'll try to explain what I think you're trying to do. So Paul, let's say you have multiple Tinderbox files. Let's say 3 Tinderbox project files. And you want those 3 Tinderbox project files all to share a common set of files on your hard drive where the action code exists. So that way, if you're wanting to edit the action code, you edit in the one place in the external file, and that would update all of the other Tinderbox files. So that way you're not having to copy the functions back and forth between files, and you can have kind of a universal source for managing your action code across files. Yeah, I believe that's what that was trying to accomplish. Is that?
Yeah, exactly. Yeah.
Quick follow-up. Does this relate at all to the feature that's been promised in a future version of Tinderbox to provide links between Tinderbox files?
No, not necessarily.
No.
So the link between Tinderbox files is letting me see the text or the attributes related to another file, but that doesn't necessarily say that the functions are going to run. It could, it might. We don't know yet.
Yeah.
Gotcha. Thank you.
I mean, I'd say it's sort of tangential in the sense that probably having those links might enable you to do things via action code. But I'd agree with Michael, they're not being put in there expressly for that purpose. But as it's a toolbox, when new things arrive, we can normally find new ways to use them that they were never envisaged for.
Great,
Yeah.
thank you.
Yeah.
All right, so Detlef, go back.
Okay, but very important addition to my talk, and so it's especially useful, Paul, if you're working with the Tinderbox functions and program your own way to handle. I'm doing it a lot, and so I have many of those functions and they grow over time. That's also a problem. If I copy this function into one file and use it there, then I build a new file for another task I'm using Tinderbox for. And then I experience, I need an improvement of my code. I have to change it a little bit. Then I have two versions of the same code, an older one and a newer one in the new file. And I would have to copy it back to the old file to make it run there with the new code. I don't have to do it, but normally I would like to have one version of all my code snippets all over. And so again, it may be an opportunity, or it may be the better way to have one place to store the code and to use it in all your files. So if you make a change, you will see the change in all your Tinderbox files immediately. It's always the updated version of your code that's running in all your files, not only in the one where you changed it. And
Detlef, so personally, I run into this constantly. So if you've got this working, I'd love to see it. And then two, would it also work for templates?
I didn't try it out with templates so far, but I think it would work with templates too. Yeah.
Okay, cool. So can you demonstrate it?
Yeah, I will in a second. It's just pling to explain how great my work. No, I'm coming to it. Also very important for me is I don't remember who did it, but we have a very nice language module for BBEdit. For Tinderbox, and BBEdit is my most favorite coding editor. I'm using, for example, IntelliJ, the IDE. That's a very big one, a big IDE for coding, but I prefer BBEdit whenever I can. And
so let's just give credit where credit's due. That was Pete.
Great. And BBEdit, to edit the code of Tinderbox in BBEdit is, I have my editor I love to use, and it's very, very nice to code outside of Tinderbox with BBEdit. That's also a reason why I would like to have the files, the coding, the source code outside of Tinderbox. So back to the code. So it would be very easy because we have the watch folder property, and watch folder, what it does is it looks into a folder in the Finder and imports all the files in this folder. So here you see I have a folder, user Detlef, that's me, documents, Tinderbox code. That's where all my code files as simple text files lie. They are stored there. And if you look, for example, in this one, it's called tools, and there you have a lot of function, whatever you like to use. And this is the file is external to this one. You see it here. It's the tilde sign here. It's the user directory, documents, Tinderbox code tools. That's the name of the file. Now we are running into a problem, and that's what I tried to solve here. What we need, the code files, the function files, to be in the library folder of our hints directory, of our hints node. They have to be there. Otherwise, Tinderbox will not recognize the functions. They will not work. They have to be in this folder. So what I'm doing here is I use the watch folder. The watch folder is importing all the files. And then I have an action here on add. I think I have to share my whole screen to show it to you. Let's see. Desktop 1. And now you should see my inspector. Do you see the inspector? Yeah.
Yes.
Yes. And so, no, where is it? I have this simple edit manage external code running here. And then this node external code in my library has to be local. This is the only one I have to copy into a new file to make it running. And there I have this init function. I really like to use them, and Tinderbox is very powerful right now with this. I have to run external code init once in a new file, and it will implement everything I need. It will create.
What does init stand for?
Init is initialize.
Okay.
I'm using init for all my functions where I need to create something. For example, creating an attribute, create my global preferences. I create a node called G external code. Then I create all the attributes needed and other stuff I need to do. And then this function manage external code is taking care of those external files. So for if anything is going on here, it will create a copy in my library folder here. And for example, I should be able to delete them all in the library and also delete them here. Hopefully, I don't know. And magic, just so they appear here. The watch folder just updates all the files inside my external code folder. And now I go back to my library, and hopefully, if it works, sometimes it's an addict. They should reappear inside my library folder. I don't know why it's not running. It should update. Sometimes. Okay, it will update, and the code for the external I know why it's not working because I also deleted one node that is that I need to have locally. Just give me a second. Revert changes. Open recent external codes. I should not delete external code nodes because this is local to my file. So, okay, I delete all the other ones. I clear my watch folder node. They reappear here, and now it should work. After some time, it will
I'm getting very excited. This is wickedly cool.
So, and the complicated stuff here is, for example, I have to store whether the external file names, because you can run into synchronizing problems. If the file is there, then I delete it, I get an update from an external file, and the code here is mainly complicated because it has to synchronize several things to make it running again. It should.
And are you does the watch folder, is your code looking for like modified date changes, or
yes, also, yeah, kind of. The watch folder itself is updating if the files are there, but for example, I have to see whether a file has been deleted, and I have to update it again, and for example, I have to remove a node in the watch folder if the external file has been removed before, remove the local copy in the library folder if the external reference node is missing, because everything like that is not working automatically. And with this, it's doing it automatically. I don't know why it's not updating the library folder right now. It should, but
Where's Detlef? Where's the code? Is
the
it a
code
rule?
is here?
Right.
Okay. Yeah, I can show it to you. For example, here you have the exif code file. It's just a simple text file.
Yeah. No, I'm just wondering if you're saying it's waiting to update, is it waiting to run some action code in the Tinderbox, or is it waiting for something
I
external?
didn't prepare the demo for today, so maybe my code is not working as it should, but normally it should have updated the folder for a long time.
Yeah.
I forgotten to tell him. Yeah, that's it. I made the here's a scan folder because the synchronizing is complicated. I don't have to synchronize twice because I don't want to overwrite things, and so the scan folder has to be off. If I look back into it, now it's on again. So I have a flag sitting there. I scanned the folder, everything has been updated, and now the external code is back into the library folder. That's what I missed.
Dude, that is really cool.
And I have two update folder. It's if I deselect scan folder, it's a 2-pass update of the folder. So I'm setting 2 flags to get it in here, and it works fine. And then you have all the functions back into your library folder, and they work as normal. It's no problem at all.
Now, here's another question. In your because I tried playing with this in a similar way, but I like you've done it much more elegantly. In your function files, do you have a YAML like header to it that tells it what attributes need to be in this file to support it?
No. That's a good one, but because I told you, let me see about, for example.
So how are you generating the attributes that a particular action?
I just started to use this initialize methodology for all my files, and so what I'm going to do, I think maybe YAML is also an alternative, is that I will have a standardized naming scheme for this init function. And so if whenever I include a new file into a empty new Tinderbox file, it should run this init function.
So the way I approach that is and I did this on all of my templates, was I would say like LinkedIn URL : URL, title : title, right? Whatever the or it's going to be title : string. So whatever and I just put that at the top of the file and prefixed it by necessary attributes.
Yeah.
And then I had a little sub function too that would check whether or not those attributes existed in the file or not. But and then what it would do is it would then generate all those attributes that were missing.
Yeah, that's missing right now. Because I'm just starting with doing this external stuff, but it always bothered me that I had to copy and paste things, and I never knew which version was the last one. And so if anybody is interested in, I can paste it to the forum.
I deal with this on a daily basis, so if you could please help solve that for me, I would appreciate it.
So it's
and multiple times a day, not just on a daily basis, multiple times a day.
Yeah,
awesome.
I can copy it to the forum, and then feel free to play around with it.
Yay, that was awesome. Where I see it, not only will I'm going to try it with the templates. So I'll take your code and modify it so we can do it with templates too, because I have hundreds of templates for different purposes. And that would be really interesting to try to apply that. Awesome. Art, it looked like you were ready to ask a question.
No, I was just saying it's pretty darn amazing. I love this.
Yeah, no, wickedly good. Okay, Detlef, thank you for letting us throw you on the fire like that and showing us a fabulous demo. So any other comments, thoughts, ideas? Who else has any other projects? Okay, Mr. Anderson.
It's more of a thought. I was reading, sorry, I've been away to conference for a week, so a bit blown out. But I was reading, catching up on the forum as I got back, and I thought there was an interesting observation by Art. In fact, he was here in the room. This was the thread on Obsidian adding some function, and I was just reminded of the thing that I think we all tend to trip over when looking, sort of comparing things, is the difficulty of looking past your current knowledge. So when you're looking at A and B, you tend to look, if B is the new thing, you look at B through the lens of A, which is often exactly the wrong way to try and understand what B does. And I'm only now just sort of mulling on that to think about how one can actually make that more useful, because that sort of wrongly framed comparison, I think, is at the bottom of a lot of rambling threads. It's entirely, I mean, it's, you know, and it's not a bad thing. We do it. It's almost natural for us to do it. But actually, it gets in the way of meaningfully understanding differences, and indeed, it makes those differences sort of opposing rather than just applying to different things. In other words, when you know, as a number of people here have said, you know, different things for different purposes, and actually, if you embrace that, it does work well. Rather than trying to say,
that note, in the thread you're referring to, maybe we can drop that into the chat.
Oh, sorry, I do apologize. It is the thread was
and that thread kind of started by me a few days ago because I saw that Obsidian has added a properties or attribute like functionality.
Yes, that's the one. Yes, thank you.
And I'm not a big Obsidian user, so I thought that was interesting because I see Obsidian getting closer to Tinderbox like functionality. And I love the dialogue that's popped up and realizing those gray edges in between. And and Art's example was perfect in that one's not better than the other. He uses them for different suited purposes. Obsidian has an iOS app, so he's able to write quick notes, organize those notes in iOS. They sync to his hard drive, and then through watch folders, like what Detlef was just showing, he pulls those MD files into Tinderbox.
Yeah, because I think it's difficult for any of us, and most of us here, I suspect, aren't developers. The thing that's all too easy to forget is when one says, well, it just ought to, is sometimes, occasionally it's trivial, but more often than not, that just is at quite a big cost of sort of time and development that might be spent on something actually more useful. And this is why sometimes when we get locked into these things about why is an X more like Y, it doesn't actually help at all. And that's no one's intent, but it does take us down a blind alley. Anyway, I'll stop now.
Well, but on that point, though, if you learn to appreciate that X doesn't need to be like Y, and that you appreciate that they both work together well, then you can use them both. And as long as you can get over the cognitive dissonance that gets created from having too many tools, you then can start creating quite a bit of efficiencies. Art, you had a comment? I was hoping you'd chime in.
Oh no, I'm waiting for David first, but yeah, okay. On this topic of the Obsidian thread, and in fact, Detlef just raised a question that would be interesting to see how working in Obsidian, what it has. Let me just raise what he said. Sorry, scanning. It would be nice if Obsidian users could show where working with Obsidian is so much nicer, faster, or better than with Drafts or Tinderbox. And in fact, I was just kind of raising a response to it, but I wanted to preface it with that same caveat: is that I can't really compare the two because there are certain things that affordances or features that Obsidian has that relate only to using Obsidian. I wouldn't need those in Tinderbox at all. So, and also addressing what Mark's saying is you look at application A through the lens of A and you look at application B through the lens of B. Ultimately, they're all sort of performing tasks on massaging my data as it's flowing through. And yeah, once I get to the point that the data is in Tinderbox, I don't actually need a lot of the bells and whistles that Obsidian provides.
Yeah, makes sense. Okay. David, and then we'll go on another topic.
Detlef has got his finger on a crucial aspect, and Art also mentioned, or maybe it was, well, someone mentioned, you got to have a collection of tools. I mean, I remember the local Home Depot here, the big hardware store, they had a wall of 40 different kinds of hammers. 40 different kinds of hammers. And so knowing how to, under which circumstances to use which tool is the learning curve.
Yeah.
And Detlef is on the thing of change management, automating change management. You cannot do it in one single place. It just doesn't work that way, because the power of the tools and the complexity of the tasks has to be distributed. And therefore, that issue of watch folders, which hopefully I have not used them, but hopefully they mean what they say, is you've stuck a watch folder in your process. And if something changes, it kicks off a bunch of other stuff that says, wake up, you got to change these other things.
Right. So on that note, let's make the distinction. So Paul Christie just chimed in. So Detlef, can you share screen again and show us the difference between a watch folder and simply dragging a file into Tinderbox? Yeah, Paul's curious about how a watch folder works.
Yeah, for sure. Okay.
And a watch folders, that's a Mac OS thing. It's not Tinderbox, right?
It's a combination of Mark's done. Watch folders were around before some of the Mac stuff, so Mark's done some of his own pixie dust to make it work. And and most recently, watch folders got some a new enhancement with the Readwise integration.
So I will interject that ATBref has got an excellent write-up on the watch folder and its caveats and limitations also.
Yeah.
Okay. So external code, this node has the watch folder attribute, and this is the watch folder we are watching right now. And so what I do is just duplicate this file. It's tools copy right now. And then we have to wait for a second until it will appear.
I believe you go to the file menu and hit run agents. That kind of forces forces Tinderbox to do it.
There it is. And now we have the file that is located here in the external folder, and it's automatically added to the watch folder here. And so if that's a normal watch folder behavior of Tinderbox. It's very, very easy. And what I did here is, so now if I hit my scan, he created a copy here, but this is not typical Tinderbox behavior. That's my code. The watch folder is only, you just add the attribute watch folder, then you tell Tinderbox, this is the folder you have to watch, and then you put into the folder, you put anything that Tinderbox is able to open, a file format that Tinderbox, and then you will get everything that's in the folder right here, and then you can process it, do the stamp, or do whatever you would like to do with the code.
And then before you shut off screen, can you do us one more favor? Go up to the file menu, and Paul, there's some built-in ones too. If you go to File, Watch Folder, much like you do with prototypes, you'll see that you can watch from notes, watch from a Finder folder, or watch from DevonThink or Tot. And so in addition to being able to watch a Finder folder like what Detlef is doing here, Mark Bernstein's actually integrated, like you can go watch a particular folder in a DevonThink file.
Yep. Yep, that's also very nice. Yep.
And Tot, if people don't know that, is similar to like a drafts or a notes. It's another one of those universal note-taking to-do list kind of low overhead applications. It's quite nice.
And it's really easy to do it. You just create a node, add the attribute of watch folder, tell Tinderbox, okay, that's a folder to watch. And then, for example, you could do it with an Obsidian folder. You can, and all your Obsidian nodes will automatically be imported into Tinderbox.
And as
Yeah,
Paul,
I do that.
and as Paul has said in the post we just were talking about, because Obsidian generates native Markdown files with every file, that kind of natively pulls into Tinderbox. I'm sorry, I talked over somebody. Was that Art?
Oh yeah, I was just saying that I do that with the Obsidian watch folder.
Very cool. Okay, and Paul, you still have your hand up. And more, another question?
Yeah, well, just kind of to follow up on that, are there performance considerations to watch folders? I mean, say if you point a simple Tinderbox file to a watch folder with 1,000 Mac files, is it actually managing those files and storing them? Is it going to bloat your file, or is it just a set of links?
I think I can probably take that one. I mean, I think all these things are not these things are not designed to sort of basically ingest large parts of your wider system and do stuff with it. The best way to use them is deliberately, also on the external end of this, in terms of the folder you want, that rather than say watch, you know, a folder or set of folders with 1,000 items in on your Mac, because that might be useful. A better way to use it would be to make a new folder in or proximate to that folder set and put in things that effectively you want to inform Tinderbox about. The difficulty is, I think, is that it feels a bit like a sync, albeit an inbound only one. But I think you get the most out of it with a little care of application, because certainly if you do start heaving in vast amounts of data, and bearing in mind that Tinderbox is not trying, also it's not trying to recreate all that information inside Tinderbox. It's really, I think its starting supposition is akin to Tinderbox notes, small bits of text. So if it's looking at 1,000 JPEGs, you're not really helping yourself in any way, shape, or form, because to say, oh right, I've got these things, right, there's nothing meaningful I can really do with them. I may have just shot myself in the foot there, because I think there's some recent changes as to how Tinderbox sort of handles file types, but I still don't think it pulls in images. But if you get my drift, I think you get the most out of it if you use it as a sort of like an external inbox for things that you know you want in Tinderbox, i.e. generally text, rather than some sort of a light syncing thing. And definitely both watch folders and watch groups, which is basically the same mechanism but working inside DevonThink, are best used lightly. And it's a good idea. Originally, there used to be limitations too as a number running, and I think that's come down. But it's a good point that if you are using this a lot and everything seems to be slowing to a crawl, it's definitely one thing that you can look at and see if anything squirrely is going on there. Does that help?
Yeah. Thank you.
Mr. Art.
Yeah. So I will say that I'm using watch folders. I actually have been using watch folders consistently since the last 5 or 6 years, even at a certain point of time when it sort of broke in Notes and broke in Finder. And I'm super dependent on it, but not to a huge, enormous extent. I never had more than 50 or 100 things that are being looked at in the watch folder. But there are two things I would bring up. One is that it's not really like a reportage environment, because it's not really telling you what's been going on outside with changes in your external files and things like that. The one recent feature that had been added is that if you delete the external file, Tinderbox will react by striking through the watched note from within Tinderbox, which is useful now to know that that file is deleted.
Yeah, that's what you see here. I just deleted the file in the folder, and Tinderbox doesn't delete it here. And that's what I'm taking care of this with my script, because Tinderbox itself is not deleting the file.
Now, and again, that could be an interesting Boolean too, because you could say, do delete it or not, because you could check on that. If name strike through equals true or false, then do X.
Yeah.
Yeah. Interesting. Very
Yeah,
nice.
and the other point I was going to add is that, and this sort of in conjunction with what Detlef has just been showing, this marvelous sort of approach to using watch folders, is you can, in the very same Tinderbox project, you can watch multiple folders in the Finder. So I basically co-opted that to create like a Tinderbox project file, which is an ingesting project file. And so I will have a watch folder that goes out and looks at my notes, another watch folder that looks at my Obsidian, the one Obsidian export data folder, the one that looks at whatever Dot, Devin think, whatever I would want to. And I assemble and collect all those files within one Tinderbox project, which is so much then easier to apply attributes and to sort of massage it into being a Tinderbox capable note, wherefrom it can be copied and pasted into its destination Tinderbox project.
Yeah.
So that simplifies the whole process of collecting and aggregating.
Mr. Anderson.
Yeah, just another thing. As we're talking about watch folders, and I was just trying to skim through my ATB ref thing, but in case it doesn't say it, it's something that it's easy to mistake. Is also the idea is with the watched folder, the idea is it makes a note with content for you to do stuff with. It is not expecting you to edit the note that's being created. So in other words, what Tinderbox is doing with the watched folder is saying there's some information here. It's a thing that is quite easy to do is to then start working on the note inside the watched folder container, but that's not how it's intended to work, because but basically it's trying to mirror what's outside. So that my understanding is that the sort of design intent is you say, oh right, this there's a new note here, or it's changed, and then you might copy that note away and work on it, or you might copy paste the information. And a bit like an agent, if you delete an alias, the agent will just make you a new one because it's still aliasing the source note. If you delete the note out of what the watched folder, you're not deleting it on the hard drive. You're outside in Finder, and when the watched folder next runs again, it will dutifully make a new proxy. So maybe that's one way to think. Actually, it's not. I was going to say maybe think of it like an alias and an agent, but no, because you're not working. You're not working on another note. The note inside the watch folder container is a valid note, but it's not intended. It's not made read only. But if it's a good idea to treat it like that. In other words, anything you want from that note, do it elsewhere in the Tinderbox, and you should be fine.
Yeah, and likewise, you shouldn't be pasting things into the watch folder, right? Because those will get eventually eradicated because they're not there.
Yeah, the actually entire purpose of whatever is being watched is really only a reference, and you need to copy and paste it out to create a true note, right? The watched note is not a true Tinderbox note. It has some attributes that are disabled or locked. You can edit attribute values, but you cannot edit the text of the note. It will revert to what is being watched.
Yeah. Very cool. Okay, since we're talking about forum examples, there's another one that came up this week that I'd like to share, unless anybody else has any other topic. Right.
Just quick, you can put it at the end. Detlef asked me to talk about stuff at Hypertext. I would say it wasn't a technical conference. I mean, it's really talking about the sort of the method and the existence of Hypertext. I'm very happy to talk, but I suggest we use it as a filler because there are probably more opposite things to discuss in there.
Well, that plus I got to go, and so as much as I want to hear it, I can listen to the recording, but I can't participate in stuff we want to share. So so let's see, where is the here. So last week, we had another forum discussion, which was quite interesting. So Wakamatsu-san wrote an article about how does he trim text, and he had started seeing some errant behavior, which we were able to dig into, which I think is really important for Tinderbox people to be able to see. So he had created several notes. Let me reproduce that. And in those notes, so these are simple with not very complicated text. And then in these notes, you'll see that there's some special characters in here, like brackets or square brackets or round brackets, sometimes a quote. And if you're performing and essentially what he was trying to do here is he was asking Tinderbox to go collect the children of some notes, and particularly grab the name of the note and the text of the note, and then stick that somewhere else, what he was calling my memo. And he was asking, when he was suggesting when I do that, what was happening to him was he was getting these extra semicolons in the result of the note. I can't reproduce this problem because I fixed it, but you get he was getting these semicolons at the result of the note. And where that's coming from is if Tinderbox is collecting into a list, because that's what collect does, it creates a list. If Tinderbox is collecting into a list, if it sees special characters like that are, I'm guessing regex related or something that the system will stumble on, the parser would stumble upon, what Mark Bernstein has done, the developer's done, is he's wrapping that text with a quote to instruct Tinderbox that this is actually a string and treated as such. And then he's dropping that into the text. And so what Wakamatsu-san was asking here in the forum was, he was pointing out here, I'm getting these quotes. How do I remove them? And the way to go about his first attempt to remove them was actually quite good. What he built was a see if I can find it. Basically, he was doing a trimming function. He was experimenting with ideas like do replace, and then he was experimenting with ways of using the substring operator to remove the first and the last character. There's another function called trim where you can actually be removing punctuation. And so that was all very interesting. Before I go to show my response to what I think was helpful for him, Mr. Anderson, you have a comment there? You look like you were getting ready to comment.
No, it all makes sense. I've been watching it slowly scroll by, but I haven't got far enough down the rabbit hole to figure out quite where the problem was. But yeah, this sounds about. It's really essentially the fact. It's like if you've got some text with a semicolon in it, and you're going to make a list of texts, then the one with a semicolon in definitely needs some way to stop the list parsing code turning that text into two texts rather than one. So that's the general pattern problem you're tripping on. I should be interested to see how it's solved.
Right, and so for example, and so in that regard, you'll notice so lists are built by these semicolons. So when we apply a collect our children, let's go ahead and create a new note just to do it from fresh. So if we create a new note here, and just to be clear, we'll call this one my list, just so people can see the operator. If I go my list equals collect children name, right, and hit apply. Sorry, you'll see it's collected the children of note 1 and applied that and created a list. If I say my list corrects children text, what I'm saying is go collect the children of the text of this note. And so when I do that, you'll see that it's now collecting the text of that note. And if I look at each one of these, note 4 text, note 2 text, note 3. So it's now created a list of the text of the note. So now if I go to this one where note, and I'll just delete this one so it's not confusing. So if I go here and say my list, right, and I'm now going to collect, and there's only one note. I'll create 2 notes just for fun. Note 10. Right. So now if I'm creating I want to now grab the text of note 6 and note 10, and let's put note 10 first so it shows up first in the list, and hit apply. You'll see I get note 10, but now if you look here, you see that little apostrophe. It's dropped in, then let's copy that out of here and put it in here. It's created the list, but it's dropped the apostrophe in the front and at the end of the note 6 text that it collected. And it's doing that because it's escaping one or more of the characters that it's finding in here that it would otherwise break the list. Okay, so that's kind of what I wanted to demonstrate, and you'll run into that quite often. And there are ways to so once that happens, there are ways to address that. And so let me show you one example to address that as we're just hacking along here. So you can see here, if I say, and now I'm going to make, for the sake of this demo, I'm going to make the text, I'm going to say text equals my list dot, spell it right, my list. And then we'll use the operator. I don't remember what to call this, Mark. What do you call this operator? The little square bracket thingy? So
helpfully, it has no formal name within action code.
All right. But basically what you're doing is I'm saying go and another critical thing to remember here is Tinderbox is a zero-based list method. So the first item in the list is 0. The next item in the list is 1. So if I want to get the item 0, if I want to get this first, note text 10 in the list, if I say my list, make the text equal to my list 0, the first item in the list. If I apply that, I get note text 1. If I apply it and say 1, I get the second item in the list, and so on. Now, in this example, if I wanted to remove those semicolons, we could do a, what is it, a trim mark? Or trim, can't remember. Substring, if I do like a substring 0, 1, what can, and you can just experiment with this. We're just going to play right now. But if I do that, you see I delete everything. If I do 1, 0, maybe. Okay, so what I've now what I've done here is I said, go grab my list 1 and then do a substring and only grab the first character from that. So those are different things that you can do in experimenting with the tool. I'll get to the other example I did in a minute, but Art, you had your hand up?
Oh, yeah, I was just going to ask, so then if I ever see, as a consequence of any spam for action code, if I ever see this escape character, does that actually mean that the Tinderbox has hiccuped it and in order to protect my data has escaped that?
Yeah, okay. I wouldn't call it a hiccup. What he's doing is he's saying, Tinderbox, treat this like a string. Because if there were semicolons in here,
okay,
right? If there were semicolons in there, Tinderbox would see that and then generate a list right at that point, because lists are separated by semicolons.
Okay, so I'm misunderstanding. Now I'm noticing now that the first character of this text attribute is actually the escape. So are you saying that it copies over the escape and then treats it as a separate
and so what happens is Tinderbox is sticking that in this string into the list, and because it's got the parentheses are the quote around it, the single quote, that's telling when Tinderbox is doing the collect, Mark wraps the quote around it so that Tinderbox treats it as a string as it's populating the list.
Oh, I see. So then if you want to pull the string, you have to do it in post-op, essentially.
Right. And so now what I'm going to do, if I want to get rid of that quote, I could, or if I knew there wasn't any other single quotes in the list, I could do a dot replace and remove. Like if you've done it with special characters, I could do a dot replace and remove the apostrophe, but I don't want to do that because you might be using apostrophe somewhere in the text. So maybe Mark Anderson, if you can help me remember, how would we trim the first and the last apostrophe in this example?
Well, yeah, if I do at the end, I know I was just going to round out the thing about why you've got this. It's the problem is that Tinderbox, the sort of both the action code, which is really surfacing what's going in and what's happening internally, is fairly lightweight. So you don't have sort of explicit data types under the hood. I mean, we talk about having data types to tell Tinderbox, this is what I mean. I mean this number to be treated like a number, or I mean this number to be treated like the text that describes this number. If I type 10, it could be, because if it's a number, I can do addition and multiplication. If it's text, it's just text. So when Tinderbox creates a list, it just basically gets a list of characters with a semicolon after each source. Now, if that source happens, for sake of argument, to contain a semicolon, then that single source item, unless it's told otherwise, becomes 2 list items. because when it's read as a list, the Tinderbox just looks for the next semicolon. So the point of this escaping, in a sense, is literally just say no, this list item runs to the, if it starts with a single quote, you want to look for the single quote before a semicolon. That's where this list item ends. And
So
ideally, it will be hidden behind the curtain. Sorry.
So basically it is, no, I'm sorry. So it's basically what you're saying is, so it'll encapsulate that whole thing and say whatever's within these quotes is just to be treated as one encapsulated string, and ignore any special characters that you find within this realm.
Yeah, and I don't think there's a bug as such here, but I think ideally this stuff would emerge from behind the curtain without this extra character on it. So it's unintentional in this case. So the next thing is, well, how can we trim it off? If I recall, trim function is designed.
Mark, I quickly pulled up ATB ref.
Yeah.
And so if you pull up ATB ref, if you say .trim punctuation,
yep,
you'll see now, if I go back here, and let's go here, and I'll remove that. So if I run this, you'll see I've got it at both ends. If I add the trim, I'm saying Tinderbox trim the punctuation in the front and the beginning, and now the punctuation goes away.
Yeah, I would just add that what's treated as punctuation is not listed, and it's potentially go down another rabbit hole. I think it works here, and this is one of these things that if it works, I just run with it and not worry unduly as to exactly how it works. It's slightly open-ended because the idea of trim is to get rid of things like unwanted white space at the beginning of end of texts, where it doesn't matter in one location, but when it turns up in another, it does for some reason, whether it's just because of the way it displays or whether it has some ghastly sort of effect that you didn't want. You could also use substring by basically saying give me the thing, but starting at the second character and finishing at the penultimate character,
right?
With the appropriate math. But
with that though, you need to calculate how many characters are there so it knows how to do it.
No, you should be able to start at 1, and if I recall, -1 is the last position. So I think if you did substring 1, -2.
So we do dot substring.
So we start at 1, which is the second character, and oddly -1 is the 0 the other end. So you'd be -2. We'll see.
That worked. So that's the same thing. So if you see it, we'll delete that, and you'll notice so that's the same thing. So you're starting at 1. Remember, we're 0 base. So when we say 1, we're actually starting at the n. And when you're saying -2, what you're saying.
So this is two tools in the box doing the same thing, and which you use probably is which you prefer. Trim using the word punctuation obviously basically is looking for a range of things. So in a way, this is more explicit using substring, because that you want everything except the first and last characters, which you happen to know are, in this case, are accidental and unwanted. But if the trim works, that's fine. It's unlikely to have other effects.
But it could, in which case you go to the more explicit substring.
Well, just you could try this. If you put the text back, the text in the note back to the version with the quotes.
Okay.
No, I mean in the note, note 5. Okay, sorry. Okay, right. Apologies. Right. That's fine, because the thing that you'd be looking for with trim perhaps is if it removed both the apostrophe and the full stop or period at the end, that might be a bit of overreach, where trim might be doing what it thought it said. If you say get rid of the punctuation, it might do that. So it might remove more than you wanted. So in that way, the substring version is more explicit. But I wouldn't overthink this. In most cases, if it works, it works, and I'd stop with thinking too far into it. Your punctuation is best well.
Yeah.
What did the Romans ever do for us?
Exactly. Yeah, you're right. Look, so yeah, when I trimmed, I didn't notice that before. I trimmed both the period and the extra character. So in that case, we lost more than we wanted. right? Good catch on that. Sorry. So so I love what this came up here, and the discussion that Wakamatsu-san had helped start for us, because I think it does help us understand the way to operate a little bit more in what we're doing. The other example that I gave him, though, that I think would be appropriate to share now in the last 4 minutes before I leave is let's go down to note 10. I think this is the one I was playing with. Is I told him and I explained to him this way. So I've kind of moved away from collecting explicit or specific attributes like go get me the name or go get me the text because I've gotten comfortable with like wanting more. So what I've been learning to do is let's go ahead and fix this demo here because I was demonstrating something for him. So so essentially, let's read through what I was doing here. As I'm saying, first go clear the destination note. Actually, let me fix that because this was a different demo I was doing for him. I'm saying go clear the note, the text of the note named destination note, make it empty. Now create some variables. And what I'm saying is rather than collect the name or the text, what I'm saying, hey, Tinderbox, go get me the ID string of the children. And then what I want you to do is give me a variable name, variable text, and then the name of the parent, which happens to be the note that I'm currently selected. And then I'm going to make the name of the parent the name this. And then I'm going to say go iterate. And just for the sake of argument, so we have more than one, let's go ahead, note 12. Let's say text note 12. All right. Then I'm going to say go. So what happens is when I'm going to click on the stamp on note 10, it's going to go get the ID strings for both note 8 and 12. And then it's going to create these variables for me. And then I'm going to say, now iterate against the list. First start with note 8 and then start with note 12. And what I want you to do is make the V name equal to name X, aka the name of the note. Make the text then of X equal to V text of the note. And then paste that text into the destination string. And what I'm saying is in the note destination note, what I want you to do is, put the name of the parent and then add the name that we just calculated and the name of the text. And so now if I go over here and demonstrate that, you'll see that this note is empty. And if I now go ahead and I've selected note 10 now, and I apply this stamp. And again, just so it's clear that there's nothing up our sleeves here, I apply that stamp. You'll now see that note 10's icon grew bigger, and we go and select that note 10, and you'll see I've got note 10 colon, the name of the note of that first child, blah, 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 and the note 10 colon, note 12, text of note. So that's kind of another way of assembling, if you want to be grabbing information from, say, the children of this note and sticking that process somewhere else. That's another thing you can go about doing. Thoughts, comments, questions, ideas around that?
Yeah, it's great. And I guess this also applies to certain situations where you know the shape of the end result that you're looking for.
Mm-hmm. Right. So for example, you'll notice here, let's say I wanted to put a delineator in front of that. I could say plus like this. Right. So in doing this, what I really want is this. So now I can actually see there's the delineator, and then maybe I want to put a couple of these. And that's my alarm telling me I have to go.
Yeah.
But let me finish this off, and then I'll go. So then if I put this here. Oh, sorry, I did want ends. Quote plus, and now I do it on note 10 again. You'll see that I've interjected. I did something wrong. You'll see I've interjected a delimiter in between the two notes, which you then could use explode with to parse.
Got it.
Excellent.
Oh yeah, I was just going to two things. One is I was just going to ask: have we determined for sure that this special character, whatever it is, option 5, 6, that it's completely inert and will not be seen as a special character within Tinderbox?
Yeah, like this number 6. I just made that one. That's option 6. That's just
I know. I saw you mentioning it at some point. But
Yeah.
is that a mark? Do you know? Like, is that a character that we can freely use
I think
without
it's
it?
I've never run into any problem with it. I don't think it's it's not a
Okay.
regex character, so I can.
It's the section marker.
Yeah.
And it's many used these days. Okay, well, sometimes some people use it as a footnote character if you're using non-numbering footnotes, but you might say who uses footnotes anymore?
Right. Okay, fair enough.
And
And
then
the second point I was going to.
One idea, and just before I go, this is another one that just came up this morning, is someone was using capture to do a similar, go capture the name of the note to parse it out. And they were asking like, how do I, so he, rather than using a citation manager, they're putting like Becker, comma, this book. And then I interjected this idea of there being a publication year in the creation of your note. And so what you can do, similar process, go create a list, but this time I'm creating my list with the split function. I'm saying create a list by splitting the name of the note at the commas, then using that same operator, get the first item in the list, make that the author, the second item in the list, make that the title, third item in the list, I want you to add an @ sign, and then construct what the citation is going to be, and then grab the year and stick that into, which is the third item in the list, and stick that in. And so when I paste that, you can see I'm populating those items. And I think
That's very cool. So split basically means ignore everything after that particular character, correct?
Yeah.
Okay, cool. And I was also going to add that we are losing several members today. So if you're all okay with that, we could probably wrap sooner than later.
Yeah, well, I got to run. So I'm going to handing off to Mark Anderson now, and I'll take you guys later. Bye.
Cool. Thanks. Bye.
Yeah. So, yes, I was just thinking back to that thing of those markers. I mean, on my UK keyboard, the section marker, the sort of S-like thing is left of the number 1 key, but I'm pretty certain it's different on a US keyboard. But a paragraph for me is option 7. You're probably used to seeing that if you've ever turned on sort of hidden markers. If you look at Word back in the day, and you sort of turned on, hidden stuff like spaces,
invisible
there. And then you've got you probably noticed in the forum, I use footnotes in the forum, and it sounds odd, but sometimes you just want to put something out of the flow of what you're trying to explain without diverting into another argument. So was it option 5 is a dagger, opt 5, and then I just put it in the chat, and it's Alt Shift Alt 7.
And Mark, you're referring to these in terms of common usage, not what Tinderbox sees, right? Tinderbox doesn't see
no, Tinderbox doesn't use these a special. If I recall, I mean, the reason I use double dagger, because if you were using the sort of symbol based footnotes, there's normally 5, and it starts with an asterisk, but we're using Markdown, so that means you've just opened an italic section, so that doesn't really help. But yeah, I only put them there because if you ever want to use those characters, they are there. I must say, I one of the things I always set when I'm sort of putting on a new Mac is to make sure the keyboard viewer is up on my menu bar.
Right.
If you've never used it, it's if you just look in the helper online for the Mac keyboard viewer. The great thing is basically you see a keyboard on screen, and as you press the buttons, say if you hold the Option key down, you actually see the button face changes to the symbol it's going to be. So that can be quite useful.
Oh, that is sweet. I haven't thought about that. Excellent. Okay. My only problem is I have that silly that hidden bar now on my M1 laptop. So a bunch of menu things has disappeared and never to be seen unless I go to external monitor, etc.
You're right. I must say, if you're, I have exactly the same. I normally work on a pair of external monitors, and I just do my like now my Mac is on a riser over here, and that's my email. one way to get a thing that I've come across, well, recommended from others, which I in turn would recommend, is an app called Bartender, which is, I don't know, $10 or something. But what it can do is effectively it will manage the available space at top right of your of your window.
I have something called Hidden Bar that's the same, but it's kind of iffy. It doesn't always work right. And then, I mean, clearly, I have at least 6 or 7 items that I always need to see anyway. I can prioritize them with these bartending apps, but there's always going to be 1 or 2 that escape.
I'm not surprised, actually, because I do remember that when the bar came in, there was a bit of, on my RSS feeder, they've got 1 or 2 things that I just read from developers, because though I only understand about half of what they write, it's often an indication of just these sort of things happening. And it's a bit like when they first brought in dark and light mode, and it was done by someone who is sort of probably thinking of marketing more than actual use, because there are all sorts of ways, it's like, what do you do if you copy something in light mode and paste it into something in dark mode? Because if the text doesn't know what color it is, as Mark B would say, hilarity ensues, and it's really not what you want. And of course, it takes you right out of the flow if you were just pasting something, and now you've got to stop and figure out why everything's the wrong color.
Yeah. At the cost of invoking a much larger argument, I sort of roughly divide the Apple UI into, during Steve Jobs and post Steve Jobs era. Something like this hidden bar issue would never pass muster. It's so annoying, and such a poorly thought out feature.
Yeah, it's funny. It's clear because Detlef's obviously using dark mode. I found I tried it in the end. I gave up. Funnily enough, because certainly as my eyes are aging, it's contrast. But I can see if you're coding all day, if you're coding all day, those sort of things are quite useful. And funnily enough, if some of the apps I don't do it with BB Edit, but I do it with things like Sublime Text and VS Code if I've got to fiddle around some stuff. But I don't find it falls naturally in the sort of text domain, partly because I don't know how others go. I find it incredibly hard to proof my own writing. I can write it, and it's only when I see it almost in a separate context do I notice all the mistakes that I didn't spot when I thought I was proofing it. It's obviously something to do with the neural pathways.
If you're a writer, then you're perforce you have to overcome that.
But it's like I was talking to some just last week, some people who are doctoral students at the moment. I said, it really helps for you to acquire a set of proofreaders of different things. Find someone who speaks whatever language you're writing in well and has also command of the language. Find someone who's good at just good at proofing, and you'll have no problem finding someone who understands your subject. But the thing that
it's absolutely correct. Even there are bits I've worked on for hours or days, and then I've given it to someone and say, hey, you know that you used place twice in 2 lines, and crap. It's a human thing, right?
So I just somebody's kind of Bartender. I'm not sure if it's Bartender app or something, but it's very easy to find. That I must say, and it was Dave Rogers, I think, who put me onto Text Sniper. With that TEXT Sniper, or one word, which is a really nice. It's basically it's a screen grab OCR. So you just select text on screen, and it will give you a good extraction. It's a small app, minor, but it's one of those things that when you want it, it's just so convenient. Sometimes. If only because you don't want to have to say open that file in a different window or something and burrow into the text. It's remarkably good. I think it uses what's built into its live something that's in the Mac. I think on the iPhone, for instance, you effectively it OCRs any text it finds in the picture in case it will be helpful. It's the same engine underneath, and OCR has got a hell of a lot better than it used to be.
It's basically just compacting the steps, isn't it? That's all it's doing.
Yeah. And it might get the odd thing wrong, but especially if the thing's a bit skew. But I have to say, it's still incredibly good, and the error rate compared to the sort of OCR you find in papers from before the millennia. Yeah.
Yeah, it's a huge time saver. I mean, in fact, I had posted about this before about live text. I mean, completely, game changed my situation because I write physically on paper and pen so many notes. All I have to do now is write a little more neatly. And let me not even get started onto the exactly. Well, I have a collection now too. So sad, so terribly sad. But it's like. But I'm actually perfected. And, there is one thing about analog writing that no computer has been able to approach for me now. Because, say, for example, I'm putting some thoughts together. If I just write that word a bit larger or italicize or with a flourish, I can go back to it afterwards and tell the context as to why that one particular word stands out from a paragraph, or that type of organization is not yet intuitively available to computer usage. You have to go to left brain and go Command B or whatever it is, color text or highlight text, and that throws you out, right?
Yeah. Well, also using a fountain pen makes you, if you try bold for emphasis, you press harder, you just get a blob of ink, which is Mother Nature telling you to maybe be a bit less expressive.
Yeah, or like you and I probably and a few others have gone to school, and for us, we were forced from grade 3 to start using, and only fountain pens were allowed until grade 9 or so. So yeah, I have the inked fingers of childhood to remember.
Try doing it left-handed; it's even worse.
Oh God! What do you then? What do you do? You use like a fine nib and very dry ink and things like that.
I tend to write with blotting paper under my hand.
Okay.
I like the ink sufficiently that I'm prepared to put up with that embuggerance.
With the other bullshit, yeah.
It's silly.
There's room
Christmas
to invent
cards, I always do.
Oh, okay, yeah. So you have your own calligraphic, your CM nib as well for Christmas cards.
Yes.
Deep my in the addiction, I see.
My family would probably prefer I didn't, because everyone says my writing's like high-grade crypto, but that means they write and say, what did you actually say in the Christmas card? And then that starts another conversation. Yes.
What are the odds that I'd find another fountain pen user on the Tinderbox meetup? Yeah, no, but it's amazing, and really I can't. In fact, I have now this whole ingestion system that's coming into play, and so happy to go back to written text for that reason. Fewer notes, but each with more import, so to speak.
Actually, thinking back to ingest and really spiraling back to the beginning of the conversation, the stuff that Detlef showed, I think there has been sort of conversation along the way, and I think sort of around in the sort of backstation things about, for instance, having a common library, but all these things that have unintended complications. So, I mean, I was watching the thing earlier and think, well, from the department of what could possibly go wrong is when you update something and you've now not only screwed up this file, but all your files. And the problem is that those of us most likely to suffer from those mistakes are also those most likely to make mistakes. So I can see that needs to be some sort of care in approaching them, because of course, if you're used to sort of formal programming type version control, you've probably somehow internalized. You make different mistakes and equally bad ones, but just not not these ones. But I would imagine we're probably heading towards a point where it may be possible to have a sort of or like an internal library. But then again, you see, if you're working on 2 Macs, then you've got another syncing problem. So it's problems all the way down.
Yeah, I mean, actually, because Tinderbox is so useful to me, and it being a single user environment, I long ago abandoned my desktop. I actually haven't used my desktop for years. I don't even know like whether it works anymore. And M1 laptop, and really it saves so much energy. But this was again going back to the issue of reportage in the watched folders. You really, it works to the extent that it works, but it's not really going to go beyond that and tell you, what your version of that particular external file is, and so on. When was it last changed, things like that. I guess you can, right, with the modified date. It must be updating that. Or last access date or something. I'll play into it because it is now part of my process. I'm just kind of firming up my ingestion, realm.
I think also something that, I can't remember. I would have written, it'll be a TBRF somewhere, but I know there was a thing about preserving I think if you copy and paste notes to between documents, it now preserves the creation, one or both of the modification creation dates, because if, for instance, you're copying something into a newer document, it might seem odd that you might have a note that was created before the document was, but that creation date might be very important to what you're doing. So in other words, it doesn't really have any. Keeping it doesn't necessarily have any downside.
Yeah, that's why I created the timestamp attribute. It just works for me best.
Good. I'm just keeping another. Well, yes, I see Dave's put out. It always reminds me of I don't know if have you come across Pen Island, which I won't ask anyone to type the URL in. If you do it mentally, you'll realize where you get to.
I'll try. There's so many though. Have you seen Mountain of Ink? There's this guy who basically reviews inks, and he's got over 2,000, and he writes exactly the same text for each color.
There are. It's lovely. There are, just as there are people who will sort of describe cameras or televisions or something in detail you didn't know was possible. There are people who, do that with pens and inks. I mean, this one actually, I got the. I don't come with this. A firm called Twisby, TWSBI, I think it is, little company in Taiwan, run by a guy who everyone refers to as Speedy on the ground. So whenever you email, you seem to get an instant reply, and it is from him because he never sleeps.
Twisby is great. It's a great company. Yeah.
Yeah, they're nice. I mean, although they're acrylic and you might think they're sort of cheap, the good thing is you can completely make. They're inexpensive, so you can have lots of them in there. And so one thing I like is different colors for different. It's like highlights. Different colors.
Yeah. Got it.
And then there's an angry color for writing to the council.
Well, I actually have a very specific requirement because I like to hold a thin pen with a relatively long set of holding area. So I yesterday picked up a. What is it? It's a Kawiko student, and it works exactly right because it has a nice body. But Twisby goes ahead of everything else because you can see how much ink you have left before you leave the house for the day.
Yeah. Yeah. So, before we fall down the pen rabbit hole, creeping along. So, do we have any other? Are there any other points that anyone's got? A silence falls, which is fine.
Yeah, nothing really.
Yeah.
But I do like what Detlef brought up. I mean, the bones of it are just fantastic. I can definitely see myself applying it, and it never actually struck me that I could do that. But I'm sort of doing that with ingesting. Now I'm ingesting from like 4 different sources, from handwritten all the way to drafts.
And I
why
think
not
for anyone,
go to libraries?
Yeah, and if people are sort of watching this later or listening and looking back, I wouldn't be worried. I wouldn't anyone get hung up about the fact it looks like an awful lot of code, because bearing in mind you're not going to edit that code. If you share something and you reuse it, you won't need to deal with that. The fact that you can select the note that it's in and your eyes can see the code should not concern you, because basically it's just going to sit there in the document and do what you want. So for those who are sort of code averse for whatever reason, which I fully, and that's something I sort of fully understand. It shouldn't be worrying.
Well, I think the only issue nowadays for me is delving into anything that combines AppleScript, and because who knows the present and future of AppleScript and all that, and shortcuts. I don't think any of them are really solving each other's problems. It's just like 2 or 3 paths that are just kind of slowly running into sand. So to speak.
Yeah, I mean. Shortcuts. Yes, I think that the problem with AppleScript is they would have buried it in the backyard long ago if it weren't for the fact that it's so embedded in the media industry that the Apple executives would probably end up buried in the backyard. So
for sure.
it continues unloved and unsupported, and I don't know at some point, because they keep trying to break it in all sorts of new ways, but it rumbles on, and it does. The nice thing is actually, I mean, I have AppleScript debugger, which is something. I mean, it's not a cheap tool, but it's something to have if you really felt you wanted to go further into it, because it actually gives you some view of the innards. And I mean, he does an education license as well for it, but it's another of these tools that's last man standing. But that and they're about. I can't bring their names to mind, but there are a number of AppleScript related forums that are full of people who just are going back to the opening point about subject matter experts. Absolutely. And they will normally be able to get you something, and again, normally by just giving you some magical bit of a snippet of text with a warning, don't even try to understand what this does, but it does the thing you want.
Wizards of the Arcane. We have a couple on the forum as well, right? I think Sumner.
Yes. Yeah.
Is there Mark or Art? Is there somebody on the forum particularly literate in AppleScript?
Yeah, like I was just saying, I think Sumner and I'm not sure who. There are one or two. In fact, if you go back probably a year and a half or two, there was somebody who was kind of posting regularly all these outstanding Applescripts for use with Tinderbox.
Yeah, there was a guy now who I drew a connection as well. It was unfortunate. He had something of a rage quit over. I don't know what it was that he wanted, but he asked for it, and it was suggested he wasn't going to get it, and that was his response, and he disappeared, which is a great shame because he had an enormous amount of knowledge. But I think the other thing to remember is just because if the expertise you're looking for isn't in the room in terms of, say, the Tinderbox forum. Most of these things like AppleScript are sufficiently niche that you can, it doesn't take very long to find a forum where there are people really talking about this.
Right.
We'll die to jump in. Even the Apple developer forum, I think. Sorry, the Apple user forum has got people that dip into AppleScript all the time.
The Mark, the subject matter experts. Are you aware? Have you heard of the either Mark or Art? Have you heard of the 99-1 rule?
No.
What is this?
In forums, specialized forums, groupings, just like this, 90% of the people lurk silently. 9% post occasionally, engage. 1% keep the ball rolling. And it's just there's a wiki page. I think they call it the 1% rule. But it's just sort of some people are shy. They don't like to post. Others, like to lead the show. And
I think that's a human nature thing since the advent of publication. Newspapers, like, what is it ever all? Who writes to the editor? 0.01%.
My life.
But with a sort of a forum about a tool, another aspect of it is many people will learn because they're learning. So people will, there are people who, wait, they don't come to these meetings and watch that, and that's cool. I mean, that's why, that's the joy of us being able to record these. So in a sense, all we're doing is making a podcast at the moment. And you could look at it that way. And in fact, the problem of forums is actually where everyone's trying to contribute and not normally helpful, because it also blows up. But it is nice. But the opening talk of sort of subject matter experts, that reminds me. I mean, my sort of start into knowledge tools was as sort of randomly as a young. Sorry. Well, I was going to say, as a young naval officer, I was given this posting where essentially, I mean, I was dealing with tactics, but call it core business process if you want to generalize it. And one of the things I found was, it not being the most intellectual of trades that I was in at the time, that no one actually sort of went and talked to the boffins. But you get on the fountain of knowledge, if you just scratched around a bit and then put things together, was enormous. And I think that's sort of rather what got me hooked on this line of work, which is a sense of it ought to be solvable. I just haven't found the right person and asked the right question yet. And that's not everyone's approach.
My my objective for Tinderbox is that, I mean, basically, the power that's embedded in an M2 and Tinderbox is basically a room-sized computer in my start of my career. And particularly, I look at the issue of, is there anybody on that shows up in these forums that's under 50? Rarely. So the knowledge that's embedded in the operational systems needs to be passed to the next generation. And the older generation talking to the younger generation is hardly a new challenge. I do have fathers and sons on my reading table, so. But the difference is that the systems aren't going away. I mean, it used to be if the guy that owned the farm dropped dead, well, someone could step in.
Yeah.
That ain't, the systems that our generation has put into place over the decades. Well, the NATS thing. I'm now after this, I'm going out to coffee and reading this NATS document. I'm curious as to what happened, because this is, at the risk of boring everybody, I see this through the lens of Y2K. Most people saw Y2K. I mean, they don't understand the detail that a computer does not think. It only deals with detail, and there is no 2-digit number after 99.
Yeah.
Most people cannot comprehend that, especially managers who write checks. And now we're coming up on an issue where the subject matter experts, they're looking at retirement in big companies. And so how do we, I have yet to come across, and the way a subject matter expert shows up in a company is they're at top of their salary band. HR is very uncomfortable to be paying these people this amount of money because they're techies, they're not managers. If you're a manager, we can pay you more, but they've tried to be a manager, so they don't want to be a manager, so they go back to being a techie. Now these people are coming up on retirement, and they're not going to tell their boss, who's 20 years younger, that he's full of shit. That we're not. But
it's interesting. In SME terms, there was a Tinderbox, almost one we had in London, but moons ago, a guy came up, and I went and mentioned the firm, but a large engineering firm whose name you'd recognise had done the usual thing. They cut a check for with many zeros at the end, for one system to rule them all, and they could all go to go to golf early. And suffice it to say, this was all done and was trained, and quick as a flash, nothing happened. And this guy had been, I can't remember. Anyway, he'd been asked to take a look at the information flow, and he'd done it. He showed us this wonderful Tinderbox map, and there was the map of how this system worked, and I sort of overlaid on it in the map actually where the information actually flowed, which, suffice it to say, was not through the tool board. But I mean, the issue there really is, if you want to harvest that, it's a leadership problem in nearly every case I've met it. If you actually want to harvest stuff, then you've actually got to do it from the top down, and with someone wearing this sort of stuff. But someone wearing the stripes to show.
I look at Tinderbox. I mean, this image. This is a test data file. Do you remember? This is from Safeway.
Okay.
When did they went bankrupt? What, 25 years ago or so?
Yeah.
So this is and this is a teeny tiny test data file for a Y2K project.
Okay. Yep.
And that's what the network looks like. And it's the human subject matter experts that can make sense out of that rat's nest.
Yeah.
And my interest, that's always refreshed coming to these meetings, is the Tinderbox is a single tool that is basically where an individual collects a lifetime of knowledge and can retrieve it. Yeah, which is the great challenge.
Well, I mean, I was using Tinderbox a lot last week. The citation network I made, which is 34 years of a conference, and just looking at which documents cite which. But in the process of making that, what's become amazingly apparent is the other bits of information I put onto the records. And precisely because I didn't do it in an automated fashion, because I was trying to weed out machine copying errors, so if you look in citation databases online, everyone says it's all in there. Well, no, it ain't. But one of the things that is in there is all the OCR errors that are just stripped right out because no one actually proofs things. And I've got sort of Tinderbox. Well, actually, hold on a second. I can. There's no reason to show. Where are we? It's this screen, I think. But
I mean, part of the.
You see this?
Of the challenge, yes.
Yeah. So, but I mean, and this is a real mess because, like so many, it was never designed to be seen by lots of other people. But, loads and loads of things. So you'll see one of the things I got so fed up with going to a conference and people saying we should have more women, i.e., there are too many blokes in the room. I said, well, that's all very well, but you have no figures. So I started tracking things like that. Simply so we could do this. And I mean, this sort of led to the paper. I presented that last year to Hypertext, and the paper that won this year, which I did with my Beck supervisor, was sort of started really because I got so fed up of, there's that line in The Simpsons where Homer says, "What they have the internet for computers now," and working in the sort of hypertext, I'm constantly being greeted by some young blades saying, "Hypertext, they did that in the web, didn't they?" Which, of course, is completely the wrong way around. Though I fully admit I came to an understanding of sort of hypertext in the wider sense through the web, which I started using in the early. I started about must be 94, but which was about when it started. But basically, it was free. It wasn't because I had no technical knowledge. The kindness of strangers and a zero cost of entry is amazingly powerful, which is really it's one of the things that informs ATB Ref, because before that I did a thing. I used to work with Extensive Portfolio, which was one of the few cross-platform desktop image databases.
I remember it.
Yeah, well, it goes back to, and it was built as an internal system in an ad agency in San Francisco in 1990. It seemed it was a B tree database, I think, which I didn't even know, which I presume is when you see C tree, it was the one before that. The main thing was it worked. You could in those days, Mac and Windows didn't talk, or Mac and PC didn't talk, so you had this thing that just worked across two systems, which seemed like magic at the time. But I wrote my. I actually wonder it's probably still on. Oh, this will be fun. I think it's still online.
I actually remember a time when you would walk into a developer's office with your Mac and even people wouldn't talk to you.
And now what's changed, because Apple has the advantage. I know no one should ever use computers and security in the same sentence, but the fact that the Apple ecosystem is more secure relatively, or it can be, than most of the others, or all of the others. Certainly not Windows. Windows, I can't believe. I assume this audience doesn't rub elbows with Windows people, but basically, my understanding is you have to leave your Windows machine on overnight because it's going to update. It's going to apply fixes.
That's true. In fact, sometimes you try to shut it down and it will do an hour's worth of updates, and you have no control over that.
Who's in charge here? I'm going to up the damn thing when I want to update it.
Yeah.
Not when Bill says.
So this
the security flaws.
Yeah.
What was it, Art?
So it's so right with security flaws. Sorry, Mark.
Yeah.
I was just saying security flaws are so many that they actually perforce will update it. Otherwise, the entire internet can come down.
I'm trying to find here. At one point, there's an article from this one that actually used to turn up consistently at the top of all Google searches because it had I think it was 14 different things that you needed to consider if you wanted to make a cross-platform CD. An interim technology, but was very strong at the pre the millennium.
Have you seen Mark? There's an article Sorry.
The
Sorry, David.
yeah.
CDs. Granddad, can you tell me what a CD is?
Yeah. Yeah. Mark, I think it's an article about the development of Peter Gabriel's Explorer CD. It was actually one of the first cross-platform media CD-ROM projects. It's a very interesting thing as to how he got it and put it together.
Because I mean, fun enough, the derivation. So you wonder why the ATB ref lives on acrobatfact.com, because earlier than this site, so is the first thing I did was this, which, because we worked on my little startup, we had PCs back then because we couldn't afford Apple computers. But the only designers we could afford to work with would be someone, it would literally be a art student with her Mac, and it was always a Mac. And so one of to deal with all the artwork we needed to do, I had to learn how to make dual platform CDs so I could send work to our designer, and because if it went in the slot on her Mac and nothing happened, that was game over. And I stupidly read on the side of the Acrobat box that you could make a CD that actually included a copy of Reader. And tried, and it turned out to be rather hard, but it got it going. An event, and I remember the day I've got an email from someone at Adobe said, "How did you do this?" I said, "What do you mean? It said on the side of the box, and there was this extension on the line." Well, I don't believe everything on the side of the box, but that went out into the world. That ended up as an 80-page sort of things, all the things we discovered along the way to help others. And for a while, before sort of CDs really went away, every so often I'd get an email, or the best was a postcard from someone doing an ethnography project in the depths of Laos, who sort of said, "I found this and it saved my life." And I thought, "Oh, wonderful!" So it wasn't completely wasted effort. But that's anyway. That's how Acrobat. And I never ended up doing what I did with the early one I showed you. But that sort of got me in the habit, and that's really why I ended. That's how I sort of got into doing ATB ref, because I suddenly realized that, instead of putting stuff as I used to do on a sort of, those ring binder, what they used to call shorthand pads, where you scribble useful stuff down. Well, you might as well just put your shorthand pad online, because most of this stuff you realistically can't monetize. And it doesn't help to do so unless you're in that sort of zone, because if you put a board around it too aggressively, then people stop asking interesting questions, and you don't learn interesting answers. Is sort of, I guess, how I see it, and it's what keeps the sort of subject matter expertise flow alive, because I look at ATB ref as well. It's been through, I forget how many baselines, but I started writing it in 2004.
Wow. But just thinking also that, in general, in any population, there's going to be a lot more people who just want the fish.
Yep.
Yeah, and then you have to have some kind of ring fencing mechanism to prevent
keep the barbarians out.
Yeah, to keep the barbarians from destroying the ocean. I mean, I'm sitting here, Mass Bay, and the banks, George's banks, fished out. I know one guy, his Macintosh app tracks, keeps sight of whale sightings. Yeah. So if you're a fisherman driving around in Massachusetts Bay, there are special lanes where you're supposed to be monitoring whale sightings.
Interesting.
Anyway,
so I see a note from Tom Norris in the chat about sort of loss of knowledge. I'd agree with this, and it goes across the piece. And I've seen this indeed in relation. I mean, another looming thing is sort of like government level information about retention of facts. So most Western governments, I think, have a rule that, you know, after X years, information is either is basically taken from the ministry where it is, you know, the organization it's in, and placed in a national archive, or it's destroyed. And those are the two options.
Do you know how that system works? So an agency, there's a turnover in an agency, or the age, what's out, they're going to clean out the physical paper. It gets expensive. And so they load up the 40-foot trailers and send them off to NARA, National Archives.
Yeah.
And what NARA does is, well, they might unload the trailers, maybe not, but they put them in a warehouse, and no attempt is made to organize these documents until someone actually comes and asks.
Right. I can understand that. I mean,
yeah.
The size is big. I mean, we don't certainly in the UK, which obviously where I was, we don't quite have that size problem. And what I found really interesting is that what has been missed is people haven't understood the difference of moving from physical paper to so for physical documents, a minute and literally minutes, handwritten minute notes, which is sort of where things used to be up until about the 90s. But we're now getting to the point where the digital documents, native digital documents, are now hitting the disposal tree. Now, if you've got something that was written for some possible, you know, you've got basically something that was made in the 1980s. Can you read it? You'll have an 8.3 file name. So that gives you've got 8 characters that might indicate what's there, that you won't even have a creation date because the file would have washed across so many systems that external metadata is lost. And even if you look later into the piece, so I think a lot of people now tend to be using either Microsoft Office or Google Cloud or one of those things, which is fine. But so where are the minutes? Well, the minutes really are now email. And the email is loosely linked to documents that I understand in the case of a Google Doc has no concept of a finished state. You just add another edit, which is fine if you wanted to scrub backwards and forwards on the edits. It's not so useful if you want to know, you know, this treaty, this is what it looked like when we actually signed this treaty, for sake of argument. So it's
like version snapshots. I mean,
yeah, that's why Detlef's saying this whole thing of version control. I mean, basically pushing version control, or now the popular word is DevOps. Same thing. Pushing it down to basically individual use. I mean, what Detlef was explaining, and it looks like that watch folder is part of a piece of Tinderbox or a piece of Finder.
Well, no, it's both. I mean, the bit you see is inside Tinderbox. The watch folder is it just watches. It literally, you say which folder in you know, they find it. Do you want watched? Sorry, just my front door's on. Be a second. Right.
Yeah.
Yes.
I mean, the thing is, particularly, I mean, I've only been to the Waltham Museum once. I must be 5 miles from it, but I'm literally sitting here in Boston on top of America stole the British Industrial Revolution. Thank you, Alexander Hamilton. And but the thing is, now our society is built on top of this stuff we assume is going to continue to work.
Yes.
And it comes down to those individual subject matter experts, the guy in the corner, you know, the guy in the basement, because the guy in the corner office, he's not even going to unpack because he's got his eye on the next leg up. So he is absolutely not a receptacle of knowledge. And so this is a key part of my plot of why Tinderbox is so important.
There's an interesting, Tom's point in the sidebar here about writing stuff down. I mean, I've been sort of involved in a project at the moment with it sounds great, like all things conceptually it makes a lot of sense, which is that we pay. Sorry, there's some golf bats arriving in the background. So we're doing lots of data. We're collecting lots of data because you've got publicly funded research going on, and that's accumulating data. So it may be in the paper, but it may not be. And so you have all this information upon which more research or new ideas might be created from it. The question is, well, how do you find it? And the default assumption of most people is it's some combination of writing more software, magic phase, success. I keep saying it's actually a social engineering problem, is to get people to write down what they're doing, because as Tom notes, you can't recall what isn't there, and this is another facet, is you can't search for what isn't there. AI whatever you want to put on top of it, but search can't find and can't necessarily impute what's not there. So, and this I think works down to the personal level when you're thinking about doing something in Tinderbox. One of the things is that if you're collecting information that you then need to inquire across, which is not every use of the app. I mean, you may just be using it as a daybook or something, and broadly you're recording thoughts, and you don't need to sort of search it. You might go and find a particular word or something. But if there's something that's more data-y, you've got lots of information and notes, maybe you're working on a project, then this is where it definitely helps to think, how on earth would I find this? And what that will often lead you to is using either particular system applications, or more likely your own system attributes, or making your own user attributes. And why are you doing it? Because your future self knows that it will need that to find the stuff you're putting in now. And by adding that and just populating it, which is remarkably little effort in the moment, you have that rich stream of affordances for the future. Though I'm very conscious, it's hard to teach. It is one of those things where you go through some horrendous thing where you realize that 5 years ago you really should have written something down, and it kind of stick with you. But that's kind of hard to teach at school.
Yeah, I one of the windmills, there is, to the best of my knowledge, there is no professional cross-fertilization between the world of librarianship and the world of systems. And particularly the issue we keep running across, the issue of the future you, and also naming. Michael's got his conventions. So I mean, and we are educated at the earliest age. I think at Art that said it well. You don't want to use the same word twice in a sentence or a paragraph. Well, actually, if you're talking to a human, you're trying to engage another human. That's true. If you're dealing with software, ideally you would want. It's not possible, but you want to use the same word across. Then it gets into the challenge of how many synonyms. How do I know that postal code, zip code, postal code, and postcode are functionally the same thing? This is in a increasingly thinned out educational process. That level of geographic knowledge is something of a challenge. And then if you bury this stuff, I'm up to my eyeballs in, here we are an hour and a half into, and we haven't even mentioned the elephant in the room. LLMs, ChatGPT. I have a model, I have an LLM with 1 trillion parameters.
Yeah.
An expert is actually working on a very small set of concepts. Bunch of different words, which may confuse things. And I mean, Google is built on basically statistical word analysis. Doesn't work inside software. Categorically does not work inside of software. And
Well, it's interesting. I can see an echo of that in that. You're right. I mean, in something like a knowledge system, especially if it butts up to a hard edge system like software is, that you need consistency of your vernacular. So you have your defined terms. But if you ever try to Google a problem involving words like value and things, you'll find that it's absolutely impossible, because the tool has a sort of statistical mapping, but it still has no or not yet. It has no understanding of the semantic meaning of the word strings it looks at.
You do understand. I mean, Tim Berners-Lee is a Brit, right?
Yep.
He was also he was over here at MIT, and I saw him once speak. And you've heard of the semantic web, of course.
Yep.
Semantic web. He is the author of the creator, yet standing on the shoulders of giants. I saw him speak without my twisting his arm. His idea is about linking data, linked data, which in effect, Tinderbox is a linked data tool. But linked data was deemed not marketing sexy, so it was labeled semantic web. There are no, to the best of my knowledge, there are no semantics in the semantic web.
No, and it's. I mean, yes, and a current project I'm in is involved in linked data, and this is the this, for instance, is the point. It doesn't matter how good you're linking, how good your reasoning is. You can't find what isn't there. Dark knowledge is out there, but you don't know what it is. So
are you at all close to this? What's the effort over there in the UK? I see it over in the UK. What's I'm blanking on the word. Aphasia is kicking in. What's it called? It's. I mean, they're trying to make models, computer models of if I for society.
It's actually a paper just this week. We were discussing it because doing some really interesting stuff. So they were trying to do what they wanted to do is to help educate people about the sort of the hinterlanding in creative art, and this was up in Canada, and it relates to the original Indigenous people and representation, and basically saying this bit in this picture relates to that, and it was getting down to the level of things like artifacts and their religious or social significance, and then I saw a picture of Protégé, which is the tool most people use for writing these semantic structures. And I thought, oh, crikey. So look, take a world religion in which you have some knowledge, and whether you're adherent to it or not, but of which you have, working knowledge, and try and put that try and describe that as a data set of triples. And you realize the hubris involved in the exercise. Yes, I don't think that's going to be solved anytime soon. Anyway, I noticed the sort of clock is ticking round. I just did it last week because I think the way I'm supposed to leave this is we all shuffle out of the room and leave it running, and then when Michael comes back, he can.
He'll trim most of this last conversation.
Digital twin.
I said he'll trim most of this last conversation.
That's fine. Yeah.
Yes. So, Mark, digital twin. Have you, in your travels over there, have you come across that term?
Oh yeah, I mean, in all sorts of ways. The first time I really met it was actually 2000 when I was working on one of the big teams, that are now arrived, our aircraft carriers, because you needed to be able to run. Well, they were two. They were just building the two of them. Well, we normally struggle to keep one running, but. Actually, some really interesting stuff. They even had a whole lot of guys came over from the US East Coast to sort of say what they wanted was to have an effective intelligence systems, because the ships were multi-rolled. If you were doing strike flying aircraft away somewhere distant, or you would say landing people locally, you have a different number of things. So you at one end of the process, you're moving different stores through an enormous space to either strap things onto aircraft or load onto marines you're going to put in a boat or something, and you might need to, for instance, rejig all the galley times, and the galley times are a draw on stores in terms of food cook. And one of the things that we were thinking is, well, of course, and this probably, the whole thing is probably slave to a key time, which might be, say, the 6 o'clock news on the US East Coast, no matter where you are in the world. There'll be something that essentially, because the further you get the greasy pole you go, that's really what they're looking at. So all their reports had flown. So, and this is called the battle rhythm. Actually, and the thing that I almost got, sadly, someone noticed too early, because I said, well, we were going to call our control system the rhythm method. Unfortunately,
no.
it almost got through. But you know, one of the things we realized, if you had that much degree of soft systems control, you definitely don't want to sort of change the process, you know, while you're on a live system. So they were building digital twins. I know that's not I know there are other meanings of it, and you know, and certainly and you can do it in an entirely software world as well.
Well, I see tools in the hands of a tool like Tinderbox fed through this ecosystem of watched folders, controlled watch folders, because you made the point, easy to overwhelm them. But in the hands of, I mean, literally in my world of the Fortune 100 IBM mainframes, it is the subject matter experts that keep the wheels on the bus.
Well, that's why, I mean, the interesting transition is, you know, Tinderbox is definitely not designed to sort of consume half the internet. You know, it's not like some enormous Oracle database.
Impossible.
But
a damn idea.
I think the ideas are scalable, and it's really interesting what you mentioned, because it's like, because what you're inherently sort of alluding to in terms of SMEs is the ability to have the human in the loop. And I know Ben Schneiderman has been writing about this for years, but that's the thing that's so important, is someone who's sufficiently aware of the broad stroke to sort of say, I don't think that's supposed to be happening. And they may not know the answer in the first thing, but the most important thing they do is probably start to, you know, divert their attention onto something with which an automated process can't spot, because it's looking at more binary controls, and the problem at the time of emergence is not a strict binary.
Yep.
But that's taken us some way from Tinderbox.
Now that we've solved the world's problems on a Sunday.
Yep. So
I'm going to go about that Nats incident to see if I can winkle something out of that's relevant.
Yeah. So at this point, I think this is the moment when I encourage everyone to make sure they've taken all their hats and coats, and we'll shuffle gently out of the room. I'll sort of go last, and then I'll just leave it running for Michael, so I know we haven't left anything going. So I will bid everyone a fond farewell, and I like as not, we'll be meeting. There'll be a meeting. If we were going our normal fashion, it'll be next Saturday.
Yeah, looking forward. Thanks so much, guys. It's been beautiful. What a great
Thanks, folks.
Thank you, everyone.
Bye.